Hold on. I'm trying to get this set up. What's up, everybody? Yeah, it's up in my teeth. How do I... Does this flip? No. All right. All right, we're just going to have to do this way. What's up, everybody? So this was just released today, a warning by Anonymous. And so I'm excited to get into it, and I thought I would just share it with anybody who's interested. New York Times published an op-ed last year by the same person, and the person's identity has been verified with the New York Times through their publisher and through a couple of different literary agents to verify the person's identity, and in order to protect them from reprisal, in order to protect them from any sort of reprisal or any sort of issues with their employment, he needed to publish it anonymous. And so this has been done for centuries, for decades. It's been done many times in order to protect people when it's important to get the information out. It's also been done in Federalist Papers. So there's been many times where things have been published, the necessity for it to be published anonymously. So on the cover of the book, what it says, so it was just released today. We did a pre-order, so we just got it. The cover of the book says, with the 2020 election on the horizon, Anonymous is speaking out once again. In this book, the original author pulls back the curtain even further, offering a first-of-its-kind look at the president and his record, and must read before Election Day. It will surprise and challenge both Democrats and Republicans, motivate them to consider how we judge our nation's leaders, and illuminate the consequences of re-electing a commander-in-chief unfit for the role. This book is a sobering assessment of the man in the Oval Office and a warning about something even more important, who we are as a people. And just a disclaimer up front, this isn't about Democrats, this isn't about Republicans, this is about anything. We're genuinely curious. This is a person who has been vetted, that is in the White House, that is part of the Trump administration, that has been selected, is genuinely concerned, worried, and feels that it's necessary to say something. So I think it's worth, if you are a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter, to know what people that have been appointed to serve are saying. And to deny that or to say it's the deep state or something else is really just ridiculous. So I encourage y'all, if you don't want to buy it or spend the money on it, you can tune in and we're going to go right in. On the first page, interestingly enough, quoting Theodore Roosevelt, character in the long run is the decisive factor in the life of an individual and of nations alike. Theodore Roosevelt. Y'all, character in the long run is the decisive factor. Introduction. Here in America, we are descended in blood and in spirit from revolutionaries and rebels, men and women who dared to dissent from accepted doctrine. As their heirs, may we never confuse honest dissent with disloyal subversion. That's Dwight D. Eisenhower. That's the introduction quote. The Donald J. Trump administration will be remembered as among the most tumultuous in American history. Future historians will record the volatility of the president's decision-making, as well as the internal struggles of a government forced to grapple with it. They will write that his advisors came to find him unfit for the job. He couldn't focus on governing, and he was prone to abuses of power, from ill-conceived schemes to punish his political rivals, to a propensity for undermining vital American institutions. Now, we 3 sentences in, y'all, and he's already talking about abuse of power. Now, think about this. This gentleman wrote this over the last year. So right now we are in impeachment proceedings and hearings for abuse of power. So he's already foreseeing where we are at this moment, y'all, and we only 3 sentences in. So it doesn't take much by reading the news or anything to corroborate who this gentleman is and that he's pretty close and high up in the White House. Now, we could argue about whether or not he should be honest about who he is, but ultimately, we know the president will go for your throat, so you might as well just hold tight. Okay, they will document how officials considered drastic, some may say desperate measures to warn the American people. During the Watergate scandal, key government leaders quit in protest of President Richard Nixon's inappropriate activities. The press dubbed it Saturday Night Massacre. What is known is that the same measure was considered less than halfway into the Trump administration as top advisors and cabinet level officials contemplated what might be called a midnight self-massacre, resigning en masse to call attention to Trump's misconduct and erratic leadership. Those are his boys contemplating walking out, y'all. This ain't the people who don't like him. These are his people contemplating walking out, y'all. Now, we don't have to talk about who's, let's be honest, none of them seem to have any courage to stand up for much of nothing, but you got to applaud a person who's trying to stand up in some form of fashion. The idea was abandoned out of fear that it would make a bad situation worse. It got worse anyway. Full awareness of the deteriorating state of affairs dawned on me late one evening when the loss of a good man revealed the true nature of a troubled one. It was the evening that ultimately led to the writing of this book. On August 25th, 2018, John McCain, one of the America's last great statesmen, died at home in Arizona. In the days that followed, the country mourning the passing of an American hero. The country mourned. McCain, a former military officer, first came to be known to the public for the 5 years he spent as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, where he was regularly beaten and tortured by enemy forces. One of his captors shattered his right shoulder. They broke his left arm. They cracked his rib. In his agony, John contemplated suicide. For the rest of his life, he was unable to raise his arms to their full height due to his injuries and the after effects of the torture. Yet when his captors offered him an early release, he refused until all other Americans captured before him were set free. McCain finally was released in 1973. He was welcomed home by President Richard Nixon and later embraced as a Republican leader of the future by Ronald Reagan. He went on to build a vast legacy of public service as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a senator, and a two-time candidate for president. At his funeral in Washington, D.C., John was celebrated and mourned by a bipartisan crowd of government leaders, foreign heads of state, and millions of Americans who watched and listened nationwide. In one epic life, former President George W. Bush told the mourners was written the courage and greatness of our country. Former President Barack Obama took to the podium to herald McCain as a patriot who embodied so much that is best in America. He added, when John spoke of virtues like service and duty, it didn't ring hollow. They weren't just words to him. It was a truth that he had lived and for which he was prepared to die. A central theme echoed throughout the service. John McCain was a man of character, thoroughly committed to his principles and worthy of reverence, including by people who didn't always agree with him or who he occasionally irritated with his stubbornness and persistence. But one man did not share those sentiments. Instead of feeling somberness, he felt spite. Instead of respect, he offered resentment. That man was the sitting president of the United States. It was no secret that Donald J. Trump hated John McCain. He was not a war hero, Trump remarked in 2015 to a stunned audience in Iowa. I like people who weren't captured. Though he received McCain's support during the general election, then candidate Trump bristled when the senator withdrew his endorsement in the wake of the Access Hollywood scandal. Now, y'all remember the Access Hollywood scandal, the TMZ tape where the president said, you know what, about grabbing you know what's. So that was the Hollywood scandal. And that's when John McCain said, psst, I'm out, right? In which the businessman bragged about grabbing women's private parts, and he could not abide McCain's criticisms once in office. So McCain was not having it because he is a man of virtue. So he's like, look, I will get on board with certain things, but I'm not getting on board with that. So you can't ever argue by John McCain's, his bravery. And he was for what he stood for. Whether or not you agree with him or not, he was for what he stood for. It was no surprise that the president was agitated by the outpouring of public appreciation toward the senator. He is flustered whenever the spotlight shifts away from him, but especially if it moves toward a perceived rival, even a deceased one. What was surprising was the lengths to which he would go to settle the score. Now, remember who's writing this. Somebody who's working with the president while all this is going on. This isn't a CNN commentator. This isn't somebody sitting on their sofa. This is all these people's going on. Hey, y'all. Hey, everybody. President Trump, in unprecedented fashion, was determined to use his office to limit the nation's recognition of John McCain's legacy. After being lowered briefly on the day of the senator's death, the American flag on top of the White House, was raised the next evening. Aides worried this would send a bad signal, you think? And tried to have it re-lowered. So they got this flag going, it's up, it's going down. And Trump was like, no, put it back up. And for all of us to know, the flag is lowered out of respect for people. So when you say, right back up, okay, do the math. White House senior advisors implored President Trump to issue a proclamation for flags at all the federal buildings to remain at half-staff. He had to be begged to do something. They urged him to issue a formal statement on the late senator's death and legacy. Again, have to be told to do something. These few gestures are standard protocol by any president when a distinguished senator dies, regardless of their party, as a sign of respect for the office and a demonstration that some things come ahead of partisanship. President Trump rebuffed each request. In fact, he wanted all government buildings to rehoist the flags back up again. Members of the staff were dumbfounded. Many among us had disagreements with John over the years, but we all honored his service to the nation as we would any person who wore the flag of the United States into battle and suffered at the hands of the enemy, let alone his later contributions to our country. The standoff, again, a standoff about a flag, about a congressman, was broken not by a change of heart by the president, but by public pressure. President Trump faced withering criticism for withholding support for McCain. Internally, the temperature was rising. After frantic pleas from the communications team and increasingly bad television coverage, the president finally relented and allowed for a short statement to be drafted and for a proclamation to be issued. He also allowed administration surrogates to attend memorial services. In his place, the flags, which by then most agencies had put at half-staff anyway. So these agencies are like, we're not hearing that. We are here for the team and we're going to represent. And again, this isn't party. This ain't Republican, Democrat. This is just right, wrong, respect, disrespect. And these agencies were like, nah, player, put the flag back up. Put the flag back down. And so they did that anyway, waiting longer for a presidential order. And finally, all the flags were lowered. All of that just to show some sort of respect. Now this is when this author of this book, at this point, he's like, enough is enough. Less than 2 years into the Trump administration, this episode was almost unremarkable. By then, Americans had grown accustomed to the president's pettiness. They were numb to the endless controversies. Most probably tried to look away, but I couldn't. Now, let's be honest. There is so much going on. Most of the time, you can't even read fast enough to figure out what's happening. But let's be real. What he's saying is they're using the flood the waves type of thing so that you get so fed up and confused, you don't know really what's going on. But he said he's not having it. He could not look the other way. I'd spent enough time watching one pointless indignity after another. This one, targeting a veteran and former POW, was the last straw. What did it say about our president? What did it tell us about his values, virtues, motives? Values, virtues, motives. Someone in the administration needed to say something, anything. And there was silence. So the next morning, I started drafting an op-ed about Donald Trump's lack of a moral compass and about the efforts of a group of administration officials trying to keep the government afloat amid the madness. I would know. I wrote of these officials. I am one of them. So he's basically confessing, y'all, like, listen, I was on the team. I'm still on the team. But I'm trying to tell y'all, even though I don't have the cojones to say what needs to be said with my name under it, trust me. And again, this guy's been vetted so they know who he is. But they can't release it because we have people that go after people on public platforms and do stuff. This next part is called Resistance Revisited. Since that opinion piece was published in the New York Times on September 5th, 2018, the instability within the Trump administration had intensified. One element has remained constant, however. The president still lacks the guiding principles needed to govern our nation and fails to display the rudimentary qualities of leadership we should expect of any commander-in-chief. In the Times op-ed, I wrote of a quiet resistance of Trump appointees at the highest level, a quiet resistance, trying to manage his rash impulses. So that's like you have a kid who you know is going to act up when you take him to the store, and you're trying to be quiet because you don't want to have to pop him one in the store. They're trying to manage this kid in the store where he's in public, and they're trying to deal with his outbursts. That's what he's basically saying. So he says, in the Times op-ed, I wrote of this quiet resistance. And he says, we wanted the administration to succeed, and we supported significant components of the president's agenda, but we were alarmed by his unstable behavior in public and in private. Those who tried to steer him away from self-destructive impulses were not the so-called deep state, I wrote, but the steady state. So while everybody's, if you can convince people that the boogeyman is coming to get you and that's what all the problems are, then that's what you're going to believe. And then you're going to look away from what's really going on. And so what he's saying is, he's like, those were trying to steer him away from self-destructive impulses were not the deep state, but the steady state. The people that are in the whole circus arena with him, they're trying to calm the flow. That's what he's saying. This idea was assailed by the president, but the notion that his team is working to protect him from himself has since become one of the defining narratives of the Trump administration. Indeed, it was a hallmark takeaway from the special counsel Robert Mueller's report on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. The president's effort to influence the investigation were mostly unsuccessful, he wrote. But that is largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his requests. Do you understand what that's saying? Is that the only reason they didn't find anything is because the people that are in there trying to hold back the flow and keep things moving, they were holding back the flow. So that's why they're saying Mueller didn't find what he could have found, because thank God for the people like him who are standing in the gap. Okay. This included the president's demand that White House counsel Dan McGahn fire the special counsel, a request McGahn rebuffed for fear that it would trigger what he regarded as a potential Saturday night massacre and lead to Donald Trump's impeachment. It probably would have. But again, remember, he ordered him to do it, and the man said, nah, I'm good. I'm not doing that. So imagine if he would have done it. So think about that. President Trump should not be shocked that wary aides and cabinet members saved his presidency. My colleagues have done so many times. He should be worried. We all should be worried that these reasonable professionals are vanishing. The president is chafed by those who dare challenge him. He has targeted and removed many of these officials, from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to Chief of Staff John Kelly, one by one. Others have grown tired of the charade and left of their own accord. With every dismissal or departure of a level-headed senior leader, the risks to the country grow, and the president is validated by a shrinking cadre of advisors who abet or encourage his bad behavior. We're already seeing the consequences. So you can't even count on your hand how many. We got to have a whole bunch of hands if we want to count how many people have left this administration. Sorry, y'all, someone's at my door. Have left this administration because they can't handle it anymore. The stewards of what I call the steady state, what is left of it anyway, are public servants who push back against ill-considered or reckless decisions. They are not traitors or mutineers. They give the president their best advice and speak truth to power. They do not hesitate to challenge Trump when they believe he's wrong. They try to manage their White House offices or government agencies in a way that keeps them running, despite the president's temperamental manner. When they fail to persuade him to change course, they work with the president and others in the administration to limit the fallout from decisions that will have deleterious consequences. What happens to be an enduring dilemma here inside the Trump administration. Increasingly, I've doubted whether this type of environment is at all effective, let alone sustainable. Can Americans put their faith in a cabal of unelected officials to maintain stability? So what they're talking about is when a president comes in, he gets to appoint his people. So like if Obama's people were in there, and so when Trump came in, he was like, not. So most of those people, almost everybody, you all got to go. And then Trump brings in his administration, his team. And what he's saying, those people didn't get elected. Trump got elected. So ultimately, he's saying, but these people who are running the show behind the scenes, they didn't get elected. So really, what does that say if they're the ones who are really maintaining the stability? More importantly, should they? This question is more urgent than ever because there is a chance Donald Trump, despite his extraordinary flaws and the threat of impeachment in Congress, will be reelected in 2020. By then, the guardrails will be gone completely and freed from the threat of defeat. This president will feel emboldened to double down on his worst impulses. This may be our last chance to act to hold the man accountable. Before doing so, we must look deeper at the roots of the present disorder, which is why I have written this book. So again, we're reading right now the introduction into A Warning. And ultimately, I want to read the back of this really quick. The back, he's writing why he wrote this. He said, I realize that writing this while the president is still in office is an extraordinary step. Some will find it disloyal, but too many people have confused, listen to this, y'all, loyalty to a man with loyalty to the country. The truth about the president must be spoken, not after Americans have stood in the voting booth to consider whether to give him another term, and not after he has departed office. Hopefully others will remedy the error of silence and choose to speak out. In these pages, you will not just hear from me, you will hear a great deal from Donald Trump directly, for there is no better witness to his character than his own words, and no better evidence of the danger he poses than his own conduct. So again, these are the words from this book. These are not my words. These are the words from this book. And he ultimately says, I'm writing this for Trump supporters in hope that they will read what is going on, because he's one of them. You see that? He's one of them, and he's too scared to say anything. All right. So what he says is what this book is. The criticism of the Trump administration is so frenzied that ordinary Americans are struggling to discern truth from fiction. So now we got the whole fake news. Everything's fake. There is only so much the public can absorb. When everything is a crisis and a scandal, the end result is that nothing is. You see that? It's like when a person cries wolf, and if they're just loud and yelling, you ignore them completely. And that's where we've gone. He's taken it. It's just like the circus is so loud, you just ignore it and pretend like it's not there. So when everything is a crisis and a scandal, the end result that nothing is. Americans are fed up with the cacophony. I don't know what the word, cacophony, becoming numb to it. We are looking the other way, which has caused us to lose sight of what's important in the national debate. I want to cut through the noise. I agreed to serve in the administration with the hope that President Trump would be successful and remembered for the right reasons, even if many of us had serious misgivings about signing on. So this guy's like, listen, I was on the team, even if many people, I was worried, but I said, you know what, maybe we can do some good. And a lot of people get into situations like that. But see, when you're in that and that begins to happen, you got to step up and say something at some point. And that's, I guess, this is his way of doing it. While the president can claim a number of real accomplishments, overall, that hope was dashed and our misgivings validated by hard experience. Through a toxic combination of amorality and indifference, the president has failed to rise to the occasion in fulfilling his duties. In these pages, I will underscore what Americans should actually be concerned about when it comes to Trump and his administration, diagnose the problems, and propose how we can move forward. The opinions presented herein are my own, yet there is scarcely a criticism leveled that is not also shared by many other officials on the team or those who have departed. Most are afraid to say so publicly. So I'm just curious. I'm wondering why everybody's so afraid. Like, does he have like a secret file? Like, is this some B-16 type-ish? Like, this book was conceived of, outlined, and written quickly amidst a flurry of fast-moving events and turmoil that is the norm in Trump's Washington. Nonetheless, it is focused on aspects of the presidency and this moment in our political life that are unlikely to change anytime soon. Each chapter highlights an aspect of the Trump presidency, and I believe is essential for the public to consider as they decide whether to keep Donald Trump in office beyond 2020. A great deal has been written to document the administration's chaos and over overused but unfortunately apt word. Some books have captured the atmosphere more accurately than others. Most of them have been authored by journalists and outside commentators who've only witnessed it secondhand or spoken to select sources, leaving readers to wonder how much of it is real, how much of it is spin, promoted by people with an axe to grind. In these pages, I've done my best to provide an unvarnished assessment of Donald Trump and his presidency based on my own observations and experience, not baseless rumors. Certain content in this book will confirm existing reporting or put it in more accurate light. Some of it will be new, and many recollections will have to remain in my memory until the right time. So he's saying, look, I got more than this, but he's clearly afraid of something. Lest the debate devolve into one about my identity, which I will discuss in a moment. This text is written for a broad audience, not just for those already opposed to the president. Undoubtedly, his critics who read this book will feel justifiable outrage over its contents and greater unease about our nation's present trajectory. They will fear the costs of a re-elected Donald Trump, and they are right to be concerned. Unsavory figures in his orbit have relished the possibility of another 4 years, not in the we can do good for the country way you would hope, but rather with the attitude that no one will be able to stop us. I share your worry. This text is also written with the hope that it might be given to the Trump supporter, or at least a subset of them. Many reasonable people voted for Trump because they love their country, wanted to shake up the establishment, and felt that the alternative was worse. I know you because I felt the same way. That's what he's saying. I've worked with you. He's like, I'm one of you, y'all. Many of you are my friends, but I also know deep inside you feel that something is not right about this presidency, that Donald Trump's behavior is not tolerable and is often embarrassing. We have ignored what we didn't want to see. That's deep, y'all. We've made excuses. He's just got a different style. He may be brash, but he gets it done. The other side is worse. The media is stacked against him. I shared those sentiments, but this book is in part an effort to demonstrate why excuses have blinded us to some ugly but necessary truths. I challenge you to withhold your reservations and read this to the end. That's deep, y'all. That is deep. So then the next part talks about and goes into... we got one more part of this introduction. It talks about anonymity. Let me paint a picture of America. An exceptional country founded with a clear sense of purpose is conflicted and at a crossroads. Citizens are more divided than ever, right down to the household level, and sensational media coverage only compounds it. The rhetoric of politicians has grown coarse. Congress is dysfunctional. Public officials are at odds over how to fix this mess, unlike ever before. This may be the America familiar to you in the present day, but it is not the one I am describing. This was our country in the year 1787. One second. All right. When a roaring debate was taking place across the United States, our young republic was beset with a weak central government that put national cohesion in danger. America's future was in doubt. All 13 states sent representatives to Philadelphia for an emergency convention to discuss improving the Articles of Confederation to better unify the country. Instead of simply revising the Articles, secret meetings were held at the convention, leading to the creation of an entirely new government altogether. So he's going to talk about the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists. He's going to take us through the Federalist Papers. So then he's going to talk about how 3 American leaders decided to publish a series of rapid-fire essays anonymously to rebut criticism of the document and whip up public support. The authors, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, and they chose to disguise their identities under a single pen name, Publius. These essays collectively became known as the Federalist Papers. Aside from helping to make the case for the Constitution, they are regarded as among the most incisive elucidations of the American political system. Why did they disguise their names? First of all, 2 of them were convention delegates in Philadelphia and wanted to hide the fact that they had helped author the Constitution. Disclosure would surely have led to charges of bias. Secondly, they were responding to criticisms that they had likewise been levied anonymously by other writers. And most importantly, they wanted Americans to focus on the message itself and not the messenger, right? Let's think about this for a second. As soon as someone goes against the Trump administration, what happens? A tweet? And then you got Fox News that they're going to come at and they're going to talk a bunch of against that person. So if they quit, if they get fired, if they write a book, anything, all of a sudden they are on the poo-poo list and they are blocked and deleted, right? So what he's saying, he's like, that's why the people who wrote the Federalist Papers did the same thing. The subject matter was too important to let the national conversation sink into a quarrel about the personalities involved. They hid their names not out of fear of debate, but to further the debate. So they talk about America's founders. So we're going back, y'all. That's 1787. People were drafting things anonymously. That's not anything new. Don't let Fox News or anybody else tell you that. It's just not true. It's ultimately when it's necessary, it's necessary. And the people, the publishers, the people that have put their name behind this, they know who this person is, and he'll come out when he needs to come out. It just is what it is. So, okay. So now I'm going to just go on a little differently and a couple more paragraphs, and then we're going to be done with the introduction, and then we can kind of I'll do maybe another chapter in a couple days. Many were unsure what we were getting when Donald Trump was voted into office for the first time in 2016. Nevertheless, he deserved a chance from all Americans. Despite what was said in the campaign or what he'd done at other points in his career. So think about it. This guy, he didn't have a problem with that TMZ tape the way John McCain had a problem with that TMZ tape. This guy was on his team. This guy wasn't upset about the tape, wasn't upset about the sexual assault allegations, wasn't upset about the affairs, the multiple wives. He wasn't upset about any of that. So this guy was on the team. You understand? He just got upset about the flag thing with John McCain. So he became our president, not just the Republican victor. But now we do what we've gotten. But now what do we do with what we've gotten? We all know. This book will illuminate the reality of the Trump administration and whether the current president is fit to continue leading the United States of America. I write this on the eve of what may be the most important election of our lifetimes. In the time left until we make our decision, we as a nation must consider the implications of re-electing Trump. I realize that writing this while the president is still in office is an extraordinary step. Some will find it disloyal, but too many people have confused loyalty to a man with loyalty to the country. The truth about the president must be spoken, not after Americans have stood in the voting booth to consider whether to give him another chance, and not after he has departed office. It must be done now. Hopefully others will remedy the error of silence and choose to speak out. In these pages, you will not just hear from me, you will hear a great deal from Donald Trump directly, for there is no better witness to his character than his own words, no better evidence of the danger he poses than his own conduct. So what he's saying is he's hoping also that this is going to ignite people to become courageous. The people, we're not talking about the people that don't like Trump or the people that are complaining. We're talking about the people that are Trump supporters that are up in there like, right? He's saying they're in there. He's saying he's one of them. He's saying that they're scared and they have to post a book to their people on the other side to say, you all need to read and listen. So I think hopefully this will give other people courage. This will give people courage to speak out. It will give people that know things courage to stand up. And you know, courage is contagious, y'all. So hopefully that he's done this, there will be people that begin to say, you know what? I can't just let that go on like that. So that brings us to chapter 1. And chapter 1 starts with the collapse of the steady state. And it starts with a quote from James Madison. So I'm just going to give y'all the quote. And then we can come back. I'll come back another time. Because as you see, I literally just finished cooking dinner, got my book, and I was so excited. So I'm going to start with collapse of the steady state and just give y'all this quote to chew on for the night. No government, any more than an individual, will long be respected without being truly respectable, nor be truly respectable without possessing a certain portion of order and stability. And that was James Madison. So that's where this chapter begins, collapse of the steady state. And he's saying that we truly have to be respectable. And in order to be respectable, it requires order and stability. So, and that's just a leadership principle, y'all. So I'm excited. Thanks for tuning in. I was by my fire, but I started sweating. But hopefully people will begin to think about this. And I would encourage y'all to get this book, go through it. I'll be on again probably tomorrow night, and we can go through it again. So let me know if y'all would rather me read it or get the book. We can read along. But I'll be reading, and I think it's our obligation as citizens to figure out what's going on and who's saying what and find it out for ourselves. So anyway, y'all have a good night. I'm going to get on with my night. I love all y'all. Peace and love. Bye.